In this section, we're going to be talking about the reproductive system, which students tend to like to talk about this the least. So I'm sorry to put you all through this, but it's an important thing that you know, like the functioning of your own reproductive system, and just have more information there is helpful. So we're going to start with the male reproductive system. So the males have a scrotum, which is a sac that holds the testicles and holds like the epididymis, and basically it is outside of the body, whereas like the female, like, same corollary, like the part that's about the same in the females would be the eggs are inside of her. For the male, their equivalent to the egg would be the sperm, and that is held outside of the body. And the reason for that is that they actually need to be a lower body temperature than what the human body is. And so the males actually regulate this by having the scrotum outside of their body. And when they're really hot, the scrotum will actually hang lower and further away from their body. And then when they're actually cold and then the like testicles are getting too cold, the male scrotum will draw that up closer to their body. Um, so we're going to start with talking about the testicles, and here on this picture. Um, but the testicles are basically where sperm form. And above the testicles is this structure here called the epididymis. And the epididymis is just like a small holding tank on top of the testicles where sperm mature. And then from there, there is this tube, one from each testicle, and on here you can see it better, called the vas deferens. And the vas deferens, essentially, they just carry the sperm until they get to this point called the prostate gland. And at the prostate gland, they join to form a single tube called the urethra. And the urethra is the tube that takes urine and sperm out through the penis. And it's one tube for both of those, for urine and for semen. Above the penis is the prostate gland. And the prostate gland, along with the seminal vesicles, which are here, and the bulbourethral gland, which you cannot see here, they actually work to make semen, and the semen is what the sperm travel in. It's the liquid that they travel in. So semen actually is slightly basic because a woman's reproductive system is actually slightly acidic. So when those sperm come in contact with the acidic environment of the female's reproductive system, they won't just dissolve. They're in a very basic solution, which is the opposite of an acid, so that they can neutralize each other, and the sperm will not die. Also, the seminal vesicles actually add sugar, nutrients, proteins, and enzymes into the semen, and the sperm actually absorb all of that. They use like the sugar for energy, and they use like the proteins and nutrients to power them on their journey. Okay, so I think for the male reproductive system, that's it. And then we're going to just move on to hormones. So male hormones, the male hormone in females have a little bit of it too, but just not nearly as much. Not nearly as much. Is testosterone. And testosterone is made in the testicles, and it's necessary to produce sperm. So prior to puberty, and puberty is when for boys they'll start getting hair on their genitals, armpits, chest, face, um, voice is deeper. When puberty happens, for males, they'll also start getting sperm. Prior to that, they will have semen, like the fluid that's there, but it won't have sperm in it. So there's one question at the end, and it I will explain it here because it's so much faster than reading it, I think. But there's two hormones, LH and FSH. And here's their official names if you want to read those. But LH and FSH, they regulate sperm in males and they regulate the release of eggs in females. They basically work on a negative feedback loop, and negative feedback loops in the human body are like, oh, you're low on sperm, make more sperm. Oh, you have too much sperm, stop making sperm. And so then they are like, well, now you're too low again, make more sperm. Now you're too high, make less, make more, make less. And that is called a negative feedback loop, which our body is mostly negative feedback loops. It's like constantly like a temperature gauge in a house, like a thermostat in a house that you put on the air conditioning, you put on the heater, but it's always like, no matter what, it's like a little too hot, a little too cold, little too hot, little too cold. It's so that's a negative feedback loop. So now we're going to move on to the female reproductive system. So this is just amazing to me, but every female, before she was even born, when she was inside of her own mom, growing as a baby, you developed every single egg that you were ever going to have in your whole lifetime when you were a baby before you were born. And that's just crazy to me. It's just amazing. But at any rate, the eggs develop here in the ovaries. And the ovaries will hold the eggs until they are released. Generally one a month. These are called oocytes, by the way. These eggs that are not ready to be released are called oocytes. Okay. But then once they're released, they will travel down this oviduct. Okay. And the oviduct is a lot of people will call it the fallopian tubes, and that's also correct, but your book calls it the oviduct, so just go with it. But basically, the egg will flow down this tube here, and it will eventually come to the uterus. The uterus is what will either hold an egg once a month, and if the egg is not fertilized, it will leave via like the menstrual cycle. It's commonly called a period. Or if the egg is fertilized, it will hold the baby as it develops. And then the lower end of this is called a cervix. And so the cervix is specifically the bottom of the uterus here, the lower end of the uterus, okay? And obviously this part will open along with the vagina. The vagina just leads to the outside of the body. But this cervix and vagina open as part of having childbirth. So once a month, females, once they hit puberty, a little ways into puberty. So sometimes females have already started to widen hips, develop breasts, some of the body hair in different places, all kinds of things that we tend to not like going through that phase. But once you hit your period, as far as that's called the menstrual cycle, one egg a month will be released. Now, you could have a situation where you have 2 eggs or 3 eggs for twins, triplets released. So the way these eggs form, I already said that females have all the eggs that she'll ever have actually forms when she was a developing baby. It's just still, I know I already said it, but that is just a crazy thing to me. But so all of the genetic material, in other words, with these oocytes, meiosis has already happened before before the female is born. They have already had this meiotic division, and this meiosis does result in two different eggs, but you can't have all these extra copies floating around of the same eggs. So your body makes a good copy, I guess you could say that, of one of them, and it makes a very small copy of the other one. And that copy is called a polar body, and it's actually just dissolved. Okay, I think that's their drawing of being dissolved. Then, when the egg is fertilized by a sperm, it goes through another meiotic division, and again, another polar body will be formed that dissolves, and one will form basically the developing zygote, which is the sperm and the egg combined. If there was going to be another split here, like a copy made, then we're talking about like twins and triplets. But this will never be a twin or triplet, these ones, okay? Um, so we need to go over another like least favorite, which is this whole thing is your least favorite thing, is the menstrual cycle. So I'm just going to give you a very short version of this. If you had to make a short summary of the menstrual cycle, this is what I would say. Day one, the endometrium, which is, I don't believe I said it. It's this lining inside of the uterus, okay? So on day one of your menstrual cycle, the endometrium will shed its blood. It also sheds tissue fluids, mucus, and epithelial cells, which are skin cells, and that all starts to come out through the vagina. By day 5 of this process, the endometrium, which has now been mostly shed and there's very little left inside of the female, it actually starts to reform and repair itself. And by about day 12 of your cycle, the endometrium is repaired and ovulation, meaning the release of an egg, can happen. So then by about the same time, eventually, you'll stop making hormones for the month, like the progesterone and like the estrogen. You'll see like a drop in the estrogen level. You'll see a rise at first of the progesterone, and then it will go down. But basically, this whole cycle will then start again. And it takes from about 1 to, it says 28 days. But there's lots of females that, their menstrual cycle is maybe 25 days. There's maybe some people that are 35 days that have varying menstrual cycles.